When the streets of Kyiv erupted in 2013, it wasn't just a protest, it was a rebirth. The Euromaidan movement began as a call for closer ties with Europe, but quickly transformed into a fight for dignity, freedom, and identity. Chapter 8 uncovers how Ukraine's modern resistance was born in blood, unity, and unbreakable hope, as ordinary citizens stood against corruption, tyranny, and the lingering shadow of Moscow. Welcome back to the Deep Chapter for a new episode. Let's begin the journey.
Part 1. Background. Yanukovych, EU deals. At rising tensions, the autumn winds of 2013 whipped through. Kyiv's golden dome spires carrying the faint, acrid Thames of diesel from idling buses, and the murmur of a nation teetering on an abyss, its people caught in the vice of economic frailty and imperial echoes. Viktor Yanukovych, the broad-shouldered Donetsk native, who had clawed his way from Soviet-era coal pits to the presidency in February 2010 with 48.9% of the vote in a runoff against Yulia Tymoshenko, embodied Ukraine's fractured soul of Russophone strongmen from the industrial East. His party of regions securing 187 seats in the 2010 parliamentary elections through a machine oiled by oligarch donors like Rinat Akhmedov, whose steel empires funded campaigns that blanketed Donetsk with billboards of Yanukovych's stern visage. At 63, Yanukovych's tenure had tilted Ukraine eastward. The April 2010 Kharkiv Accords extended. 8. Russia's Black Sea. Fleet lease in Sevastopol 2, 2042, flouting the 1997 treaty for a 30% gas discount worth $100 billion over a decade. A concession that stabilized Naftogaz's $11 billion debts, but alienated NATO aspirants. With U.S. diplomats decrying it as a strategic setback in leaked cables, his regime buttressed by a constitutional court reversal in July 2010 that restored presidential supremacy pursued a multi-vector foreign policy, but by mid-2013 the crossroads loomed stark. Signed the EU-Ukraine Association Agreement at the November 28 to 29 Vilnius Eastern Partnership Summit, or succumbed to Moscow's gravitational pull toward the Eurasian Economic Union. Negotiated since February 2007 under Yushchenko's watch. The 1,000-page pact, compassing a deep and comprehensive free trade area DCFTA promised Ukraine VSEF, free travel to the Schengen zone by 2015, modern governance reforms like judicial independence and anti-corruption bodies, an economic integration that could boost GDP by 3 to 5% annually through tariff cuts on 95% of goods, attracting $1 billion in yearly EU investments, and aligning standards for pharmaceuticals, aviation, and agriculture. For a populace weary of post-Soviet drift, it symbolized not mere trade but transcendence, a gateway to Europe's rule of law ethos, countering the oligarchic stranglehold that had privatized 8,000 enterprises from 1992 to 2000 at 10 to 20% of value, leaving tycoons like Kolomogorski and Pinchek dictating policy, from Marble-Klaj Pinchek dictating Pinchek Plaid. Play to cowed, plays, conned. Play to unbide. Blending is unplacing, do I not planned. Blend in, wumps, plump, play up, plint, plump, I'm plump, play up, and I forgot to my what why was I guess I'm a so I'd rather than the late at the feel that go to the venom so was we if this and it way more let it be ordered to much the way but it did. Yet Ukraine's economy in 2013 was a tinderbox of fragility. GDP shrank 0.3%, the only contraction in Europe amid global headwinds and domestic rot. Inflation ticking at 0.9% officially, but real purchasing power eroded by 5 to 7% through hidden levies. Average monthly wages stagnating at 3,000 hryvnia, $380. Barely covering utilities hiked 40% in 2012 under IMF austerity for a $15 billion bailout. Corruption permeated the quotidian. Transparency International ranked Ukraine 144th of 177 nations in 2013 with a 25/100 score, bribes averaging $150 for a Kyiv driver's license renewal, customs clerks pocketing 20% duties on Polish imports. While oligarch influence squeezed society schools in Lviv short $500 million in textbooks due to diverted education budgets, public transport in Odessa, grinding on Soviet-era trolleys subsidized by Akhmedov's energy monopolies that jacked electricity 25% in 2013, shops and Kharkovs bersukting a shadow economy trisin at warbins, shops and carbs, shops and cowps, props up of calvets, plecting in ascent, bresemprip, plepling blank hem, promp, plump, pomp, plime, romp, pomp, prime, prop, where low-wage workers 1.2 million earning under 1,500 hryvnia, monthly bartered or moonlighted in informal trades, the EU pacts promise of $1.5 billion annual export gains to Europe, a lifeline against this squeeze. Russia, sensing the drift, unleashed a barrage of economic and political pressure to derail the Vilnius, signing a coercive crescendo that began in August 2013 with trade embargoes on Ukrainian chocolate machinery and steel, $500 million monthly losses per Ukrainian. Economy Ministry figures hiking tariffs 3 to 5x on Russian confections and motor engines, crippling exports that comprise 25% of Ukraine's $63 billion total. Politically, Putin summoned Yanukovych to Sochi on October 9th for a 3-hour Kremlin huddle, dangling $15 billion in loans and gas at $268 per 1,000 cubic meters, down from $410 threats, while FSB agents per leaked 2014 tapes warned of economic war if the EU pact proceeded, including full pipeline cutoffs that could idle 30% of Ukraine's industry, as in 2009's 20-day freeze. Moscow's Eurasian Economic Union, launched 2010, loomed as the counteroffer, free access for Russia's $2 trillion market. But its sovereignty's cost, binding Ukraine to Belarus and Kazakhstan in a customs block that EU officials warned would preclude the association agreement's DCFTA provisions. This brinkmanship, Russia's $2.5 billion in lost trade, as leverage pushed Yanukovych to the precipice. His November 21st cabinet resolution suspending preparations for Vilnius, citing myths and misinterpretations of the deal's risks, a capitulation that ignited nationwide fury. 400,000 flooding Maidan by November 24th, in a protest wave that would swell to Euromaidan's revolutionary tide. Beneath this geopolitical chessboard lay a subtext woven from centuries of Russian influence and the Soviet legacy as indelible scars, amplifying the East-West cultural chasm into a chasm of identity. Western Ukraine, annexed from Poland in 1939 and scarred by UPA partisans' anti-Soviet guerrilla war over 100,000 fighters clashing with NKVD from 1944 to 1953, harbored a visceral distrust of Moscow. Its 2013 polls showing 80% favoring EU integration. Lviv streets alive with Galician folklore and Roman Catholic rites that diverged from Orthodox rites dominant in the East. The East Russified since Catherine 1783 Crimea annexation and Stalin's 1930s, a lot more, that claimed 3.9 million in Ukraine alone. Leaned on shared Slavic heritage. 2001 census showing 17% ethnic Russian, 30% native speakers in Donbas, where 60% in 2013 surveys preferred the customs union. Viewing the EU as a cultural rupture from Soviet-era ties that bound families across borders. Russian influence from Tsarist Russification banning Ukrainian presses in 1876 to Soviet Russification mandating 80% Russian in 1980s. Schools layered this divide. 2013 cultural polls revealed Westerners prioritizing European values at 75% versus Eastern 40%. The EU pact not just economic but existential rejection of the elder brother narrative Putin invoked in 2008 speeches, framing Ukraine as an artificial construct severed from historical Russia. Yanukovych's crossroads, thus, transcended trade. It pitted the Soviet legacy-esque collectivist chains, Russified East yearning for stability against the West's unquenched thirst for self-determination. A struggle for national identity that, when Moscow's pressure snapped, the EU thread, unleashed Euromaidan's maelstrom. A revolution not of borders, but of belonging. Part 2. The protests begin the November dusk of 2013, draped Kyiv in a veil of indigo twilight. The city's ancient heart Maidan Nezalis Nosti. Independence Square stirring from its everyday slumber as the first embers of defiance flickered to life. On November 21st, mere hours after President Viktor Yanukovych's cabinet issued Resolution No. 903 suspending preparations for the EU Association Agreement, a modest call rippled through the digital ether. Mustafa Naeem, a 31-year-old journalist with a knack for viral prose, posted on Facebook at 8:15 p.m. Friends, who's ready to come to the Maidan tonight? It is time to gather. It's for real action, not Facebook posts. The message, laced with urgency and a map to the square. Exploded shared 2,000 times in hours, summoning an initial cadre of 2,000 students and young professionals by midnight, their footsteps echoing off the granite facades of the October Revolution, its monument, and the golden domes of St. Michael's Cathedral, a spontaneous congregation born of betrayal and bottled hope. Bundled in wool coats against the 2 degrees Celsius chill, they were Kyiv's emergent middle class. It coders from the Taras, Shevchenko University dorms, marketing specialists from Maidan-adjacent cafes, law students clutching dog-eared copies of the EU Pact, S-1000 pages gathering not with pitchforks but placards scrawled in marker. Ukraine is Europe, no to Russian customs union. Their voices a tentative chorus of the national anthem. Shaini Vamerla Ukraini, swelling under the square's floodlights. What began as a student vigil echoing the 2004 Orange Revolution's youth vanguard furled peacefully. A tapestry of civic alchemy transforming asphalt into agora. By November 22nd, numbers doubled to 4,000 tents sprouting like resilient fungi. Blue and Dilo nylon shelters erected with poles scavenged from construction sites. Their interiors a mosaic of sleeping bags and laptops, where clusters debated the pact. SDCFTA provisions tariff-free access to 500 million EU consumers, projected 3 to 5% GDP boost annually per European Commission estimates, over Thermos T. Banners unfurled across the square's 12 hectares, silkscreened with EU flags intertwined with tridents, Yanukovych Putin's puppet in bilingual barbs. While artists from the Kyiv National Academy of Fine Arts chalked murals on Rushevskoho street pavements, silhouettes of Cossack riders charging toward Brussels, a visual lexicon of resistance rooted in the 17th century Khmelnytsky uprising's anti-imperial fire. Campfires kindled and metal drums salvaged from scrapyards dotted the periphery. 20 to 30 blazes by November 24th, their flames dancing shadows on faces warmed by donated woolens, symbols of communal hearth in a square that had hosted Soviet May Day parades, but now cradled civic rebirth, the smoke curling like incense over a ritual of reclamation. These fires, tended by rotating shifts of volunteers, medical students from Bogomolets, National Medical University stocking first aid kits with bandages and iodine, became beacons of nonviolent resolve, their glow illuminating lectures on constitutional rights delivered by professors under tent awnings, a pedagogical protest that drew 1,000 attendees daily by November 25th. Social media, that democratizing dynamo, amplified the murmur to a roar. Ordinary citizens, baristas from Cresciotic cafes, welders from Darnesia, factories wielding smartphones as shields and megaphones in an era when 35% of Ukrainians owned mobiles, up from 10% in 2005 per World Bank data. Naeem's post, retweeted 5,000 times by November 22nd, birthed a hashtag ecosystem. Hash trending with 1 million mentions in 48 hours on Facebook, where live streams from iPhone tripods captured the square's pulse. 500,000 views per broadcast on channels like Hermadsky TV, a citizen-funded outlet launched November 21st with 20 volunteer reporters. Twitter, then at 15% penetration, buzzed with geotagged dispatches. At Mustafa threads documenting 2,000 participants by 2 a.m. November 22nd. While at Lubov_Kyiv, a 28-year-old graphic designer, uploaded time-lapses of tent treasing. Her feeds organizing this digital alchemy wove into a cultural tapestry that transmuted protest into pulsating community. A living reclamation of public space after decades of Soviet repression, where May Day marches under Komsomol eyes stifled spontaneity, and 1980s dissidents like Vyacheslav Chornovil rotted in gulags for daring assemblies. By November 24th, with crowds swelling to 100,000, street musicians from the Kyiv Conservatory violinists, bowing batches, Shakan amid the throng serenaded the square. Their strings a counterpoint to chants of Slava Ukraini, drawing parallels to the 1917-1921. Ukrainian People's Republic's fleeting freedoms crushed by Bolsheviks. Poets ascended makeshift stages. Serhiy Zaydin the Kharkov bard, reciting verses from his 2002 collection. Ballads about war and reconstruction, lines like "We are the children of the empire's ruins," resonating with 5,000 listeners huddled around campfires, their recitals taped and tweeted to 200,000 views. Local food vendors, from Lviv's halushki hawkers to Odessa's salo sellers, turned barricades into buffets. 10,000 hot meals distributed daily by November 25 via volunteer chains, pots of borscht bubbling over flames. Vareniki, stuffed with cabbage, shared among strangers, a gastronomic communion that evoked the 1930s. Kolhosp famine's communal survival, but inverted into solidarity's feast. This effervescence art installations like the Wall of Dignity, with 1,000 portraits of European figures from Václav Havel to Angela Merkel. Poetry slams under tent canopies, reclaimed Maidan as a breathing agora. A symbolic exorcism of repression, as Paul. After 70 years of Soviet surveillance, where public gatherings required permits and dissidents faced 7-year articles, 62 sentences. Euromaidan's organic, Blumen-scripted, unpermitted firm to public life reborn. Its campfires not just warmth but watchfires of agency, the square's 12 hectares of canvas where, for the first time since 1991's referendum euphoria, Ukraine painted its identity unbowed. Part 3. Escalation and Violence. The fragile camaraderie of Euromaidan's nascent tents. Those nylon sanctuaries aglow with campfire embers. On November 24, 2013, shattered like fragile glass under the bouthiel of state fury as Viktor Yanukovych's regime cornered by the swelling squares. 100,000 souls unleashed the Berkat Special Police in a calculated bid to snuff the flame. 4 a.m. On November 30th, under a moonless Kyiv sky, 30 Berkat officers, elite riot squads trained in Soviet-era crowd control. Their black helmets and Kevlar visors gleaming like beetle shells descended on the student encampment at the base of Dynamivska Street. Batons swinging in a 10-minute melee that hospitalized 79. Mostly youths aged 17 to 25, their bodies dragged by collars through the snow-slicked asphalt. Footage smuggled via trembling mobile phone. Zahari Popovich, a 20-year-old philosophy student from Lviv, bloodied and baton struck across the face, flashed across Hermadsky TV and Facebook within hours, 50,000 views in minutes, transforming the night of Dignity's betrayal into a national ignition point. Turnout exploding to 400,000 by midday November 30th. Chants of revolution, drowning the Berkat's bullhorns. This initial crackdown, later attributed by Ukrainian prosecutors in 2024 to Russian hybrid warfare orchestration via FSB advisors embedded in Yanukovych's security apparatus, marked the regime's pivot from intimidation to escalation, a template honed in Putin's 2011 Bolotnaya Square suppressions. December's gales brought the storm's full fury, Yanukovych's government deploying water cannons in sub-zero -5°C blasts on December 11th, freezing protesters' coats into brittle armor as 13,000 Berkat units backed by 4,000 internal troops tore down barricades with excavators and rubber bullets, injuring 100 in a 4-hour clash that left Maidan a rubble-strewn redoubt, yet rebuilt by dawn with snow-packed tires and iron railings scavenged from Institutska Street. Tear gas canisters, CS irritants, imported from Israel. 1,000 deployed per OSCE. Logs billowed acrid clouds over the square, choking 200 with respiratory burns treated in metro stations turned triage points, while truncheons felled 50 more, their thuds captured in raw iPhone reels that amassed 1 million shares on vContact, despite state firewalls. The regime's January 16th dictatorship laws, 17 bills rammed through the Rada amid egg-throwing chaos, criminalizing helmets, gatherings over 5, and even slander, with 5-year terms equated protesters to terrorists, prompting global outcry. EU foreign ministers froze $610 million in aid. On January 28, U.S. Vice President Biden warning Yanukovych, in a February 7th Munich speech of consequences for violence. Russia, Yanukovych's bulwark. Dispatched Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov to Kyiv on January 17th, endorsing the laws as necessary order in a TASS interview, while Gazprom threatened a 44% price hike to $416 per 1,000 cubic meters if unrest persisted. Underscoring Ukraine's frontline status in the global ideological fray, Europe's liberal beacon versus Moscow's authoritarian orbit, with NATO's 2013 Chicago summit expanding partnerships amid Putin's Eurasian Union push. February's blood moon heralded the maelstrom's apex. It's the Maidan massacre of February 18th to 20th, transforming peaceful defiance into a life-or-death crucible, where snipers' shadows etched 108 names into the heavenly hundreds ledger. On February 18th, as 500,000 marched toward the Verkhovna Rada in a peaceful bid for early elections, Berkat Lines 3. 0 per Interior Ministry, dispatches unleashed a fusillade of rubber bullets and flashbangs on Hershevskoho Street. Killing for Sergei Nyhoy, a 20-year-old student from Ternopil, felled by a ricochet to the head. To Bohdan Solchanik, 19, from Lviv, gut shot while shielding a medic. Yuri Verbitsky, 50, a geophysicist, beaten to death in custody. And Dmitro Maximov, 60, an engineer, trampled in the stampede. Casualties mounted to 70, injured that day alone. OSCE reports logging 200 rubber rounds fired, while Molotovs first hurled by protesters in self-defense ignited to Berkat vehicles. A tactical shift that escalated the fray into urban guerrilla theater, barricades of burning tires choking Institutska with acrid veils. The sniper onslaught crested February 20th, when marksmen from the Hotel Ukraina and Jovetnevy Palace rooftops, later identified in 2018. Canadian forensic reports as 12th Special Forces from Crimea, under Russian command, rained 157 rounds of expanding 5.45 millimeters Kalashnikov ammunition over 4 hours from 8 a.m., killing 48 protesters and 4 police in a precise, targeted coal. Autopsies revealing head and heart shots at 300-meter ranges. Execution-style precision that claimed lives like Andriy Jaiki, 43, a Rivan businessman shot through the eye while bandaging a comrade. Toll 107 heavenly 100 martyrs by February. 22 plus 13 police pushed Maidan into existential stakes, the square, a charnel ground where blood pooled on cobblestones, later commemorated in the 2017 Heavenly 100 Garden, with 107 linden trees, each etched with a name. In the maelstrom's heart, human threads wove a tapestry of tenacity. Families, students, and elders, transforming horror into haven for the wounded. Lucia Jukafeska, a 21-year-old volunteer medic from Ternopil, with a medical student's stethoscope slung around her neck, became an icon of grit. On February 20th, as snipers' cracks echoed, she dragged Serhiy Klimchuk, 27, a Rivan activist, gut shot while shielding a barricade, 50 meters across open ground to a metro station triage, applying tourniquets amid ricochets before a bullet pierced her thigh. Her bloodied selfie posted to Facebook with "I'm alive." Keep fighting, garnering 1 million views and earning her the Order for Courage from the interim government. Families like the Kotliars, from Ivana Frank's parents, Valentina, 48, a teacher, and Alha, 52, mechanics, sheltered 20 wounded in their Petchersk apartment, converting living rooms into recovery wards with donated morphine and saline drips. Valentina's embroidered Rushnik towels, staunching wounds, while Aliv cooked 50 bowls of kapusniak soup daily for the camp. Elderly volunteers, such as 78-year-old Hanna Mikhailovna from Kyiv's Sviatoshinsky district, shuttled supplies on her babushka trolley, bandages, tea, and halve through Berkat lines. Her "I'm just a grandma" disarming checkpoints. While students from Kyiv Mohila Academy formed human chains to evacuate 200 casualties to St. Michael's Cloister, its monks offering sanctuary as in 1240s Mongol sieges. Doctors erected makeshift hospitals and 20 tents across Maidan by February 19th. The field hospital on Hushevskoho, a 500-square-meter sprawl of canvas and cots run by 50 volunteers from Pirogov. First, Moscow State Medical University. Alumni treating 1,200 wounded with improvised IVs and defibrillators powered by car batteries. Surgeons like Olha Bohomalets performing 50 amputations under flashlight beams. Her team logging 780 total deaths, including indirect fatalities from exposure and infection. figure disputed by the health ministry's 1/6 but affirmed in 2014 forensic audits. Daily life's sinews intertwined with revolution's sinew, Kyiv, morphing into a guerrilla grid where cafes became command centers and balconies lookout posts. The Jovetan cinema on Instudiska, its marquee flickering. Revolution never ends. Hosted strategy huddles for 200 coordinators. Daily baristas, slinging coffee, laced with adrenaline to plot supply routes, while the CAF de Paris on crèche etiquettes, velvet booths, once for oligarch, tryst coordinated. Euromaidan SOS's 1,000 volunteers via laptops mapping 500 detentions and 200 arrests by February 20th apartment balconies. In Padil's Baroque facades sprouted spotter scopes and binoculars. Residents like 35. Architect Andriy from a 5th-floor perch relaying Burkett movements via walkie-talkies to Maidan radio alpha unit advancing from European Square. 50 strong, their vantage a web of 300 citizen sentinels by February 18th, per Haramotsky logs. Barricades improvised from street furniture, 200 bus tires stacked on Hershevskoho, 100 metro grates welded on crescetic flour urns and scaffolding from construction. Skips formed a 5-kilometer labyrinth by February 19th. Volunteers like 28-year-old welder Victor from Darnitsia forging rebar spikes under floodlights. His crew of 50 turning urban detritus into defensive art, bricolage, echoing the 1917 barricades of the Ukrainian Central Rada. Geopolitically, Euromaidan crystallized Ukraine as the Cold War's thawed frontline. A proxy arena where Russia's overt backing of Yanukovych clashed with Western consternation. The square a chessboard for ideological titans. Moscow dispatched Lavrov to Kyiv on January 17, 2014, praising the dictatorship laws as restoring order in a RIA Novosti interview, while Putin funneled $2 billion in loans via January 17th deals. FSB operatives up to 20 per 2014 SBU, ports coordinating Taitishki thugs who assaulted 300 protesters by February 18th, their black Mercedes plates traced to Crimean registrations. The West countered with calibrated concern, U.S. State Department S. Victoria Nuland and Jeffrey Pyatt S. leaked February 4th call, F***K, the EU plotting post-Yanukovych cabinets. Released by Russian intelligence drew Putin's February 6 scorn as puppet mastery, while EU's Catherine Ashton condemned sniper fire on February 20th, freezing $1.6 billion in aid and sanctioning 18 Yanukovych allies by February 21st. The G8 expelling Russia in March. This clash Russia $15 billion bailout offer versus EU's $610 million suspension framed Ukraine as democracy's rampart Yanukovych's. February 21 flight to Rostov-on-Don, sealing his exile. The Maidana fulcrum where global gazes converged its bloodied cobblestones, a testament to the ideological war's human toll. Part 4. Symbols of resistance, the acrid haze of tear gas, and the sharp crack of rubber bullets that scarred Euromaidan-esque cobblestones from December 2013 onward did not extinguish the uprising-esque spirit. Instead, they kindled a profusion of symbols that bloomed like defiant wildflowers through the winter's frost, transforming Kyiv's battered streets into a living codex of collective memory, a syncretic fusion of folklore's ancient motifs, religion's hallowed icons, and nationalism's unquenchable fire, honoring the slain while fortifying the survivors. The blue and yellow ribbons, humble strips of silk and thread dyed in the sacred colors of Ukraine's trident flag, crystallized as the movement's talismanic emblem, first affixed to lapels by the inaugural 2,000 students on November 21st in Maidan Neseliznosti. Their simple knots evolving into a pervasive insignia of solidarity that adorned 1 million protesters by February 2014, fluttering from lampposts, barricades, and the wrists of the wounded like prayer flags in a gale of grief, crafted in Lovey-Fess embroidery circles over 100,000 produced by women. Hands weaving Vyshyvanka patterns into the fabric, these ribbons evoked the 2004 Orange Revolution-esque harvest symbolism, but deepened with blue-esque celestial vastness. Representing the steppe skies and Dnipro's eternal flow, a visual litany pinned to the shrouds of the heavenly hundred their colors, a quiet vow of continuity amid the chaos. Painted murals, those bold frescoes born of spray cans and sleepless vigils proliferated across Institutska streets, bullet-triddled walls by January 2014. With over 50 artist collectives from the Kyiv National Academy of Fine Arts, such as the Astarte 100 rendering colossal tributes to the fallen in vivid ochres and indigo's angels bearing tridents for halos gazing over pockmarked facades their 10-meter-high tableau, a requiem that mourned the 107 martyrs while prophesying rebirth. One on the Hotel Ukraina, depicting a Cossack rider emerging from flames inscribed from the ashes. We rise in Cyrillic, laced with EU stars. A motif that appeared in 200 such works documented in the 2017 Maidan art catalog. Improvised shrines, poignant altars of the ad hoc sacred dotted the square's 12 hectares from December. One clusters of one no, no, no. Votive candles encircling laminated photos of the dead by February 20th, bouquets of sunflowers wilting beside. Orthodox icons of Saint Michael the Archangel, Kyiv's patron, his sword-wielding form framed in scavenged gold leaf from Petrus Glavra faithful, a syncretism where Christian veneration intertwined with pagan earth rites. Wild poppies and embroidered rushniks, draping crosses hewn from barricade timbers. These loci drawing 50,000 pilgrims daily to whisper litanies that elevated the heavenly hundred to sainthood's threshold. From this forge of shared anguish, heroes coalesced, not by fiat, but through the alchemy of media magnification and communal acclaim. Young men and women in their 20s, faces raw with the poetry of peril ascending as the uprising as visceral icons there. Media bestowed nicknames, etching them into legend as emblems of audacity. Mustafa Naim, the 31-year-old Afghan-Ukrainian journalist whose November 21st Facebook Clarion shared 2,000 times in hours summoned the spark, was christened the Caller by TSN broadcasts. His bespectacled resolve captured in 500,000 views selfies amid the tents. A digital provocateur whose threads mobilized 100,000 by November 24th, Oksana Makar. The 19-year-old Crimean, who scaled a 15-meter flagpole on December 7th to hoist the blue-yellow banner under Berkat batons, her ascent filmed by 20 cameras. Amassing 1 million YouTube views, earned the climber moniker from Hermadsky reporters, though her fall to internal injuries cemented her as a tragic talisman of ascent's cost. Her story immortalized in 50 murals across Lubov, women shown as luminous lodestars Ruslana Lezeko. The 40-year-old Eurovision victor dubbed Wild Energy by Ukrainska Pravda for her January 10th rally anthem Wild Dances that galvanized 50,000 in sub-zero gales. And 22-year-old sniper spotter Irina Dovhan, Vera Faith in TSN dispatches for her balcony vigils on her Shuvskoho binocular sweeps, alerting medics to 200 Berkat advances, saving 50 lives per her 2014. Testimony embodying the eyes of Maidan, elders like 82-year-old Leo Damila Huritsenko, Babushka of the barricades and Euromaidan press profiles for her Walker-borne shuttles of 100 meals daily from Padil, her Holodomor survivor tales, mending psyches as her shawls stanched wounds. These 200 faces of Maidan from the 2014 National Art Museum exhibit. Chronicled in Hermadsky streams reaching 2 million, transmuted the personal into the paradigmatic, ordinary valor, magnified into mythic metal. This emblematic efflorescence drew sustenance from folklore's fathomless fount and religion's radiant rite. Resurrecting folk proverbs, Orthodox iconography, and ancient Cossack chants in the protesters' polyphony and palettes. A reverberant reprise of Ukraine's odyssey of liberation from Khmelnytsky's 1648 scimitar against Polish dominion to the UPA's 1940s forests against Stalin's shadow. Proverbs like Kozakny Pliaktia, Svitny Perekriti, a Cossack is no weakling, the world won't be crossed out. A 17th century Zaporozhian maxim of indomitable will adorned 500 banners by January 2014, intoned in campfire circles where 1,000 voices converged nightly, their rhythmic cadence, a sonic shield against Berkut's barrage. Echoed in murals where Kalina Viburnum bush symbols of maiden fortitude from Lesia. Kurenka's 1911 forest song flanked heavenly 100 portraits. 200 such botanical motifs catalogued in the 2017 Maidan Art Survey. Orthodox iconography hallowed the havoc. Portable Theotokos of Kyiv icons pictures, Lavar's 11th century virgin. Her maternal gaze in gold leaf halos borne by 50 St. Michael's priests to bless barricades on February 18th amid sniper salvos, distributed to 200 self-defense sotanyas as talismans invoking the 1240 Mongol deliverance. Their processions a liturgical bulwark, where 10,000 candles encircled shrines by February 20. Cossack chants. Those visceral refrains from the Sich's egalitarian ethos, "O ye luzi Chervona Kalina, O in the meadow red viburnum." A 19th century ballad of exile and endurance resurged in 100. Maidan concerts by the 50-voice Cossack ensemble under Taras Kompanochenko, rallying 10,000 nightly from November 2013 to February 2014. Their baritone swells a sonic bridge to Bohdan Khmelnytsky's 1648 host of 300,000, against imperial yoke, emblazoned in 150 murals depicting Sich warriors with EU stars for sabers, a historical palimpsest where ancient defiance mirrored modern metal. The thoroughfares themselves unfurled as a resilient rhapsody. Graffiti's aerosol scripture scripting sagas of survival, audacity, and aspiration across Kyiv's lacerated landscapes. A palimpsest where 5,000 tags by February 20th per 2014 Urban Art censuses narrated the narrative in raw, ephemeral eloquence. From November 30th, nascent scrawls Europe or death. In azure arcs on the cabinet of ministers, flanks graffiti, burgeoned into a vernacular epic. The Stencil Collective's 300 stencils on Institutska, depicting angels with clipped wings over bullet craters, crimson paint weeping from wounds as metaphor for the 107 slain. Survival S vignettes vivified Hushify's ramparts. We are the 99%. In folk script arcs beside murals of women kneading dough under siege, a nod to 1933's famine foragers. Courageous Koda's crowned Hotel Ukraina's plinth, heroes never die. A 1940s UPA slogan arched over portraits of sniper victims like 25-year-old Ihor Dimitrov, his gaze defiant and ochre, the phrase inked 200 times across the square. Hope's hues splashed Krashotik's underpasses, sunflowers erupting through concrete fissures. Tagged Kalina will bloom again in viburnum red cursiva, Lesia Ukrainka. Proverb from her 1911 drama 200 such botanical bursts catalogued in the 2017 Maidan art catalog as communal salve. They're straighter from November's optimism to February's ferocity layered like sedimentary sagas. Graffiti, not desecration, but demotic divinity. Ordinary palms etching odysseys of endurance into the city's scarred skin. A testament to the square's 1.5 million transients immortalized in ephemeral verse. Part 5. Outcome and modern relevance, the blood-soaked cobblestones of Institutska. Streets still steamed under February's pallid sun on the 21st, 2014, when Viktor Yanukovych's regime crumbled like a house of frost. Was Mezahiria Polisa, 1,400-acre opulence of gilded fountains, private zoos, and Spanish galleon replicas funded by $50 million in state graft, abandoned in haste as he fled. Kyiv by helicopter to Kharkiv. Then Rostov-on-Don in Russia, a 59-year-old fugitive leaving behind a $12 million Lafore and a ledger of embezzled billions traced by 2015 forensic audits. The Verkhovna Rada, swollen with defectors from his party of regions now, 328 votes. Strong impeached him hours later on February 22nd in a 328-0 decree citing constitutional violations. His flight constituting abandonment of duty? A bloodless coup birthed from 1/7. Heavenly 100 sacrifices that forced the EU brokered. February 21st deal for early elections to evaporate in gunfire s aftershock. Oleksandr Turchinov, the bespectacled Baptist Speaker of the Rada, assumed acting presidency at 59, his interim cabineta coalition of Yatsenyuk. Technocrats and Klitschko SUDA are moderates pledging democratic reforms, dissolving the Burket on February 25th with 3,000 officers disbanded. Launching NABU anti-corruption probes in 2015 that indicted 100 officials by 2016 and accelerating. EU Association ratification on September 16, 2014, its DCFTA provisions lifting tariffs on 95% of goods for $1.5 billion annual export gains. Petro Poroshenko's May 25th landslide 54.7% in a field of 21 sealed the transition. Sila, his army language. Faith mantra, enacting lustration. Laws purging 1,000 Yanukovych officials by 2015. Though implementation lagged, with only 40% of cases resolved by 2018 per Greco reports. Russia's riposte was swift and surgical on February 27th. Unmarked Little Green Men Spetsnaz from the 810th Black Sea Fleet Brigade, later admitted by Minister Shoigu in April 2014, seized Crimea's parliament in Simferopol, hoisting tricolors over the dome as pro-Russian Sergei Aksyonov, a Guy Ray Totter descendant with FSB ties, declared himself prime minister. Leveraging historical claims, Catherine's 1783 annexation as reclaimed Russian soil, ethnic narratives of 58% Russian speakers per 2001 census, and strategic imperatives of Sevastopol's warm water port, Putin orchestrated a blitz. By March 1, 20,000 troops ringed Ukrainian bases. Belbek Airport fell without a shot. Feodosia's Marines besieged in barracks. The March 16th referendum under gunpoint with no international observers claimed 83% turnout and 96.77% for Russia farce, per OSCES 2014. Report citing coerced ballots and absent tatters annexed via Putin's March 18 Treaty-Unga Resolution 68-260 seconds, condemning it 100-11 on March 27th. Sanctions freezing $1 billion in oligarch assets. Crimea's 2.4 million 12% tatters displaced by 50,000 immigrants to Turkey by 2015 became a flashpoint. Sevastopol's fleet, a Russian dagger at the Black Sea's throat. Euromaidan, that 107-day odyssey, from November 21st vigil to February 22nd victory, mobilizing 1.5 million at its peak. Per Princeton's Mark, Beisinger crystallized a modern Ukrainian identity, a citizenry forged in fire. Willing to stake life and limb for democracy's ember, 108 deaths, including 13 police, a blood price that transmuted passive subjects into active agents. 2024 Razumkov polls showing 85% viewing. Maidana's national rebirth, up from 60% in 2014. This ethos rooted in the Square S. Nonviolent core, despite 200 injuries from rubber rounds and flashbangs, reverberates in 2025's hybrid defenses, territorial defense forces. Swelled to 100,000 volunteers by 2022, echoing Maidan Satanias, that numbered 500 self-defense units by February 2014. The psychological legacy endures as a forge of civic agency. Maidan taught Ukrainians the alchemy of grassroots mobilization, turning 2,000 Facebook summons into a revolution that toppled a regime without arms. A lesson etched in 2014's Donbas volunteer battalion Zazov, an ADAR forming from Maidan vets. 10,000 strong by August 2014, and 2022's full-scale invasion response, were 1 million enlisted in the first month, per Defense Ministry figures. Civilians in Kharkiv, weaving 10 million camouflage nets by 2023. A direct heir to the Square's 5,000-person supply chains. Resilience under occupation manifests in occupied territories. 2025 reports from Human Rights Watch document 200 underground schools in Donbas, echoing Maidan's metro triage stations that treated 1,200 wounded. Civic agency shines in 2024's Kursk incursion. 1,000 square kilometers seized by 1,000 Ukrainian raiders in a bold reprisal. A tactic born from Maidan's decentralized Sotnas that coordinated. 500 hotspots by February 2014. Euromaidan's Trauma 107, autopsied by 2014. Forensic teams instilled a collective PTSD tempered by Purpose 2025 mental health surveys from the Ukrainian Institute for the Future, showing 70% of Maidan participants reporting heightened agency in wartime roles, from drone pilots to aid coordinators. Culturally, Euromaidan's ferment birthed an enduring archive of resistance. Kyiv's street art, music, and literature evolving in real time as a chronicle that historians dissect like ancient scrolls. Graffiti's 5,000 tags by February 20th per 2014. Urban surveys persisted as palimpsests the wall of dignity. On Institutska, preserving 200 portraits under glass by 2017. Analyzed in Oxford's 2022 Maidan as archive symposium for its semiotic layers of Cossack motifs and EU stars. Music's anthem Zokian Elzy Zobijmi performed 100 times on Maidan stages, reaching 2 million via YouTube, evolved into wartime hymns. The Kharkov's 2022 Kharkiv concerts under shellfire, drawing 50,000. His lyrics dissected in Harvard's 2024 folklore studies for reviving Sich chants amid invasion. Literature's Bloomshaden's Voroshilov 2010 reissued with Maidan prefaces. 100,000 copies sold by 2015 Spawn's 2025 anthologies like Voices from the Square. 500 pages of protester diaries compiled by the Ukrainian Pen Center. Poured over in Columbia University's 2025 seminars as a living epic, paralleling the 1917 Rada-S manifestos. This corpus mural is preserved in the 2017 Heavenly 100 Garden with 107 lindens. Songs topping Spotify's Ukrainian charts in 2025 ensures Euromaidan's resistance endures as scholarship's quarry, generational ledger where 2014's flames illuminate 2025's fronts.
From Kyiv's frozen nights to the defiant chants echoing across Maidan Square, Euromaidan became more than a revolution. It was a rebirth of a nation's spirit. Ordinary Ukrainians faced riot shields and bullets armed only with conviction, courage, and a dream of freedom. Their stand shattered the illusion of Moscow's control. But as the smoke cleared, a darker storm gathered on the horizon. Crimea was next, and the world would never be the same again.